Welcome, everybody. My name is Bob Carillia. I'm a partner at Resolve Partners. Today, I'm having a chat with one of my partners, Steve Cummings, who is the founder and president of Resolve Partners. And today, we're going to be talking about, a prioritized action plan when a company is looking to increase value. So, first of all, welcome, Steve. It's always great to have a chat with you.
Hi, Bob.
Okay, let's jump right into some questions here, Steve. Resolve Partners recommends a prioritized action plan to ultimately improve company value. And within that plan, there's 24 identified value drivers. To me, that seems like a lot. And how does a company know where to start?
Well, let's start from the beginning. Clients come to us really with a view to understanding where they are in the range of value, having built the company over many years. What they certainly know is how to generate profits and cash flow. But when people talk about the valuation of the company, it seems to be a big mystery, and it seems to be the something that you have to go to an accountant's office to establish. At Resolve Partners, we have put together a model that democratizes valuation. When you talk about 24 value drivers, that sounds like an awful lot of complexity to me. But what we're really talking about is identifying the elements of quality within the business that has been constructed, identifying those elements of quality that a professional investor would put a value on. That's really what we're trying to do. So I'm really glad to address for you, how we go about that. One of the first things we do is to try to understand the maturity of the company and where it sits in the range of value. We put a valuation on the company, but more importantly, we identify what things drive the valuation. And you're quite right. We do look at actually 24 value drivers. Sounds a lot, but there's a lot to look at. A business is a complex beast, and a professional investor looks at all of the things that we put an evaluation on when they do due diligence and try to arrive at an offer being a valuation of the company. So that's what we do. We take a look at the valuation in the first 30 days of meeting a client. We break that valuation down into elements of the business that drive value. In this case, 24 different things. And once we've taken a look at those things with the business owner and with all of the key people in the organization, we present to the business owner how a professional investor would look at the business, and we showcase the strengths and weaknesses of the business around those 24 values. And when we do that, we ultimately come up with a prioritized action plan for improvement in the valuation of the company. So that's what we bring to the table. I would say, might seem trivial, I would say to everybody out there that we are not consultants, we are advisors. So we advise a business owner on the elements of value and how they can improve those things. And our business model is to work alongside the business and the management team in order to make sure that the appropriate focus when they pivot to value and their mindset changes, that the appropriate focus is put on particular things that will then ultimately lead to an improvement in value as a result. So hopefully that answers your question, Bob.
No, it does, and I think you bring up a significant differentiator here, and that is, people might sometimes interchange advisor, consultant, but to me, a consultant is one who comes in, creates a report, drops it off, and leaves. An advisor is a different animal. I mean, Resolve is there to ensure that the business owners have the support on an ongoing basis, and that makes a significant difference. It's not just a report, with a wish of good luck and moving on. So,
Well,
so
I would just add one thing to that. Many of our clients actually think that working along, having come to a view on where improvements could be made in order to drive value, many of our clients absolutely like the fact that we work alongside them ultimately to achieve their goals of improvement in value. We quite right. We don't hand them. We do hand them a report, but we don't leave.
right.
We sit alongside them and we help them achieve those goals. And I think that's an important differentiator. And that's absolutely what our clients like.
Yeah. No, perfect. Perfect. Got another question. These 24 value drivers, you Resolve really identified three different levels of company maturity. One would be a company that has predictable profits and cash flow. Second would be predictable growth, and a third would be predictable value. In your experience, which level do most companies fall in, and how do those levels differentiate themselves?
I would say many CEOs that we come across, in fact, more than approximately 60%. We have statistics to prove this. Approximately 60% of CEOs want their company to be in level 2. That is a level where they want to drive growth into their business. However, we in particular want to make sure that our clients are very strong in the value drivers for level 1. That is, if all of the 8 value drivers that we ascribe to level 1 are in place, demonstrably in place, then there is a higher likelihood of a company being able to deliver predictable profits and cash flow. So we would call that level 1. Mm-hmm. And we would call that a foundational level for every business. Let me give you an example that you and I often use. We often see unintended consequences for businesses that try to grow. What do I mean by that? Well, if promises are being made by the sales department that cannot be fulfilled or are unlikely to be fulfilled by the business. Maybe there's too much growth. Maybe the level of human resources are not enough to satisfy the growth. Sometimes we see that the operating systems are inadequate to cope with the level of growth that the sales department present to the company. So if those unintended consequences occur, growth will either fail or be counterproductive from the point of view it could negatively increase value if some of those unintended consequences, like customer satisfaction issues and so on, if can occur if growth is managed in a poor way. So we focus on level 1 value drivers, and that in place that will create the launch pad for growth when with strong competencies in the 8 value drivers that we talk about, and we can talk about them later. There is a much greater likelihood of a business successfully growing and having a growth imperative with the foundational value drivers properly organized and in place.
Okay. No, thank you. Interesting, the comment you made with respect to, if the sales team, creates sales opportunities that can't be fulfilled. There's an old saying, everybody says, oh, that's a great problem to have. But it's not a great problem to have because, as you say, there's unintended consequences if you can't keep up, with the sales that are coming in. You are ultimately going to disappoint clients. You are ultimately going to put stress on the company. So I totally get what you're saying with respect to making sure you've got those basic drivers, in place, before you launch into some of the higher level drivers, I guess would be a way to say it. So, Steve, just time is so important in a business world. If a company is going to go through this process, and how long do you think they need to take a look at this prioritized action plan? Is this a matter of days, months, weeks? How long should a company be prepared to invest from a timing perspective?
Bob, I don't mean to avoid the question, but inevitably the answer is it depends. Mm-hmm. It really does depend on what the company has built to the point in time, where the business owner wants to improve value. So it really depends on the quality of what's been produced to this point in time. However, if the company is operating profitably and has achieved a level of revenue that is sizable, multi-millions, for example, not tens of millions, but multi-millions. If a company has built a level of critical mass that also drives profitability and cash flow, mm-hmm. then there is certainly a value that the market will ascribe to that company. With that base as a proposition, what we're really then looking at is understanding where the strengths and weaknesses are for that company. Interestingly, it is often the case that the strengths and weaknesses mirror the competencies of the CEO or the owner. Mm-hmm. Those owners tend to hire around that competency without necessarily broadening out the quality of the organization's resources. So it can be, it is often the case that, for example, if a business owner is a salesperson, you'll often see quite a strong sales team, quite a strong sales process, and what you might see is weaknesses in other areas. It may be in human resource management. It may be on the finance side. It could be in operations. In fact, for many growth companies, operations is always a weakness. So there might be three examples where there are weaknesses. It could also be that there's a weakness in leadership, in senior management. So there are a number of areas where it is important to have strengths at the foundational level, mm-hmm. And a balanced approach to those strengths across different disciplines is important to be able to for the business to be able to grow in a controlled way.
Okay, terrific. And we'll post, within this in this podcast, we'll post a list of those value drivers just so that our viewers can, follow along. But let's focus on level one, the predictable profits and cash flow. The question I've got, is, you've mentioned that this level is sometimes referred to as the launch pad for growth. It's such an important baseline of capabilities to have in a company. And does a company typically have to alter, their practices in each one of these categories to improve value? You mentioned that a little bit. If you've got a strong sales team, you may have strong sales processes and so on. But again, in your experience, do you see that companies have a need to address every one of these 8 drivers just to start to see that improvement in value?
I think if a certain level of critical mass has been achieved, Bob, then in general, business owners have addressed, many of the competencies. That's not to say that they've achieved best in class, but they've certainly addressed them. So I think for most, companies, business owners, that would be the case. Mm-hmm. Does that mean that there aren't weaknesses in any 1 or 2 or 3 of those foundational competencies? We see often that there are weaknesses, in different areas. Now, some of those weaknesses are totally understandable, frankly, at a particular level, size of the business. Resources are constrained. And to achieve perfection is certainly not an entrepreneur's desired end result. When he's struggling to make good margins on good sales, mm-hmm. and report good cash flow profitability, to meet the requirements of the bank and so on. So there's a good reason why businesses have strengths and weaknesses in the way that they present. However, if a business owner is looking to retire in 5 years' time, some of the things that we've talked about, the value drivers that we've talked about, need to be improved, need to be brushed up, polished up, in order that they look good on the company and the owner in due diligence.
Right.
And so it is those improvements that a business owner doesn't necessarily know how to go about. He doesn't know which ones to address first. And so here's where we can help. You talked about introduced the concept of a prioritized action plan at the beginning of the conversation. So what we're really doing here for the business owners out there is to take a look at where the strengths and weaknesses are, and to figure out a prioritized action plan that hopefully gets some quick wins right out the gate. We address the low hanging fruit that is areas that are gonna improve value quickly. And those longer term things that may take a couple of years to fix or to improve, we put into a plan that might take 18 months, 2 years, 3 years even, to execute on. But here's the thing, Bob. Here's the thing. If you and I were putting our money into a stock market investment tomorrow, mm-hmm. and we had advice that could double or triple the value of that investment. That is what we're talking about here in the work that Resolve does. It is perfectly foreseeable with a prioritized action plan to double or triple the value of the company over the period of 3 to 5 years, ahead of a liquidity event where an investor pays real cash, mm-hmm. for the exit, the sale of your company, and so there is a real significant return on investment in any investment that is made on improving the value of your company.
Right. No, absolutely. A couple of comments. First of all, my next question was going to be is which one of these drivers do you think is most important? And you may have a thought on that, but I think you've really said, it really depends, because if it's a sales oriented company, perhaps operations is the most important. If it's a, operations oriented company, maybe sales and marketing is the most important. What's also interesting though, is as you're talking, I'm thinking, even if it was, I've spent much of my career, in the sales arena, and that's certainly what I focus on in with Resolve Partners. But very often, we see a very well-run sales organization that has robust sales and so on and so forth, but the owner or founder is the one driving those sales. And we've got to remember, in the event of a liquidity event where the owner is going to hand off to somebody, he or she may no longer be there, and that's a huge issue that needs to be addressed. So even though a company might be humming along with great sales, we've got to take a look at what is making up those sales and who is driving those sales, and will they still be there, after a transition, because that's absolutely critical to the value of the company, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. In the same way, key employees may absolutely be, very fundamentally valuable to the company, and you want to make sure that key employees are retained through any liquidity event over to the hands of the new owner. But just addressing your first point, smaller companies obviously, in Canada, over 90% of companies are less than 10 employees. So there is a preponderance of relatively small companies in Canada. And in those size of companies, it is difficult to get away from owner dependence. And this is why, smaller companies, have a significantly reduced valuation, or indeed they are very difficult to sell, because most of the value is in the owner's own hands. But nonetheless, let's assume that a critical mass has been achieved with a company. Really, what an independent investor is looking for is a business that will run, first of all, normally in the absence of the owner. So once the owner is sold and exited stage right, onto his next act, his or her next act. Once that has happened, the new owner is really looking for the company to be able to operate independently, and they're looking for the quality of the people running the business, the human resource. But the leadership of that human resource, is an important value driver for any investor looking in at the business. So what do we want to see? We want to see evidence of a team that has been built out that covers off the key elements of the business, and that each element of that business have a leader that is driving a quality set of processes and systems and delivery to high standards. That means ultimately that the company is well run. By that, what I mean is the company does the company have a plan? Have management put together a plan? I mean, have they put together a business model that generates a good margin, that can pay not only the wage and salaries of the business, but the expenses of the business, but also an adequate return on profitability, good profitability ratio, such that a third-party investor thinks that the business is attractive from the levels of profit that it delivers. We also want to see that the systems and processes are in place and well documented. That's important because, as you scale the business, you want to see that people can be brought on, trained quickly, and operate, good systems in order to make sure that that the business fulfills the promises that sales make.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's a number of qualities that senior management, from the point of view of organizing the business, organizing a profitable business, organizing a business where the employees are happy, organizing the business such that the promises made by sales are delivered on by operations, and that the customers are ultimately satisfied with the products or services that are being delivered. So that's management's responsibility, and good quality management is highly revered by the market and professional investors.
Yep. No, that makes perfect sense.